Welcome, everyone. Thank you for attending tonight's Guiding the Experience program. My name is Karen Reinhardt. I'm the curator at the Yellowstone Gateway Museum. Welcome also to our Zoom audience, watching from the comfort of your couch. After the program, you will be able to ask questions, and also, I understand, during the program as well. And for our Zoom audience, please use the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen, and Diane Chalfant will ask as many of your questions as possible. A special thanks to Diane for helping with our virtual audience. Thank you also to Rob Park for co-hosting this series, and to volunteer Scott Johnson for filming the series, making it possible for Zoom programming and later for our YouTube audience. We appreciate your donations, which really help us keep these programs going. A bathroom is available up front, and a reminder to please mute your cell phones. The final program of this speaker series is next Wednesday, 7 p.m., so that's November 9th, same place. The program is given by Dan Vermillion of Sweetwater Travel Company, and his program title is Stories from a Fishing Guide on the Yellowstone River and Beyond. But for tonight, I'm honored to introduce Reed Youngbar, who has worked for the Beartooth Powder Guides in Cooke City, Montana since 2017 as a guide, avalanche educator, and backcountry hut operator. He became co-owner in 2021. The Beartooth Powder Guides offer guided backcountry skiing options for all abilities, fitness levels, and conditions. From scenic tours at Yellowstone National Park to Cooke City's classic powder and alpine terrain, they guide throughout the Absaroka Beartooth Wilderness, the Lamar Valley, and also the northeast entrance to Yellowstone National Park, as well as south of Big Sky. Beartooth Powder Guides also offers a wide variety of avalanche skills and ski mountaineering courses in the mountains that surround Cooke City. Youngbar started backcountry skiing in 1999. In 2001, he got hypothermia while training to earn his wilderness EMT from Knowles National Outdoor Leadership School. His formal avalanche training began in 2002 when he began work as a ski patroller at Mammoth Mountain in California, where he developed a strong appreciation for mitigating and managing avalanche terrain. Youngbar has also written and photographed for the Outdoor Project as a backcountry skiing educator. Youngbar graduated from Oregon State University with a degree in forest management in 2009. He made his living in the trades to support his passion for splitboarding and surfing during the winters. After 20 years of ski bumming in the Cascade, Sierra, and Beartooth Mountains, he began to pursue a career in guiding and avalanche education to share his love of the mountains with others. Youngbar moved with his wife to Silvergate in 2017. He is a member of the Park County Search and Rescue. So please welcome Reed Youngbar.
Karen, and thank you for having me. Is the mic working okay?
Yeah.
Yes. Cool. All right. Well, that was a very generous introduction. I appreciate that. I think you covered most of the things I wanted to introduce myself with, so I'm just going to move along. And please interject and ask questions as I move through the slides, because I'm going to go through a few different topics. So if there's anything on your mind, any questions, just shout it out. I'd be happy to talk about it. As an educator, that's kind of my typical mode of communication. Real time. Thank you, sir. So I really like this topic, and I was really intrigued by it when Karen reached out, because it's something that I've been talking to with my guides about quite a bit, and the experience is exactly what we're selling as guides. And so I just think it's been very much on the forefront of our minds, and that experience that people take away from being with us is really important to us. And it's something that we put a lot of effort into making sure people have a good experience. And our goal is to provide that experience is we want fun, inclusive, and positive. And in a lot of ways, we are service as mentors, because we see a lot of our guests come maybe as for a guided experience, and carry on into our educational options, and all the way up through our ski mountaineering program, and then become clients and or friends. So that experience is something that we're really trying to provide over a long-term period. And this is just the one photo I wanted to throw in of myself. It's the only photo I have of myself in my house, and it's because it's about the experience. And it's not about me skiing the best powder or the most extreme line. It's just a pure moment of joy that I had after we did ski something quite fun. So I just like to, this is what I use in my house to remind myself of why I love backcountry skiing and snowboarding. I'm mainly a snowboarder, I just call it all backcountry skiing. But it's just, I use this to remind myself of the joy that backcountry skiing provides for me. And I think as a professional, that's really important because sometimes we get really wrapped up in the work, because the work is very difficult. And it's good to have a reminder of how much joy that this brings to me and has for many years now. So when I talk about the experience, one of the things as a guide that really amplifies my experience is I often hear, that was the best run of my life. And I can't tell you how cool that is to hear. And even on some days where the conditions those wouldn't be warranted under my best run of my life. So I'm just out there trying to be positive and give people something like the best run of their life. And we're trying to do that as safely as possible too. So I'm going to get into what we do as a company. And then I want to talk a bit about avalanche awareness, avalanche education. And those are the real components that go into us providing these experiences safely. Oh yeah, and I'm also a funkle. A fun uncle. No children were harmed in the taking of this photo. But that's my niece, and she's pretty awesome. I've taught all my nieces and nephews to ski and rock climb, so that's just something that we really enjoy doing with them. So my wife is a professional videographer and photographer, and she and I have worked on various media projects in the greater Yellowstone ecosystem. And this is one we did for this is a little piece we did for the Cooke City Chamber of Commerce. I thought it'd be a fun thing to share. I think if I push page down, this is good to go. So that's a little taste of the things that we do in Cooke City: snowmobiling, ski touring, wildlife watching, and then as you notice, just a lot of pristine powder up there. It's just a pretty special spot. Raise of hands, anyone who's been spending time in Cooke City over the years. Cool. And congratulations, you can get there now. That's really exciting for us. It was kind of a stressful summer, as you can imagine. So what makes Cooke City so special? I mean, obviously moments like this, which are quite frequent. Beautiful weather, beautiful sunsets, these quiet streets that are snow-packed, so we actually have snowmobile access from Cooke City up to the northeast of town, where we have a large motorized area that connects to a wilderness area that we use on the daily basis. We're bordered by 2 national forests, 2 wilderness areas, and Yellowstone National Park. So the black dot here represents Cooke City, and the purple is Yellowstone National Park. To the north we have the Custer-Gallatin National Forest and the Absaroka Beartooth Wilderness. And to the south of town we have Shoshone National Forest and the North Absaroka Wilderness. And Beartooth Powder Guides has 3 permits, one for the Shoshone, the Gallatin, and the National Park. So we have a really diverse set of options to guide out of right from town. It's quite unique. So these are just 2 examples of places we can walk to from town. That's Amphitheater Ridge on Amphitheater Peak right there, and that's the border of Yellowstone National Park from the Shoshone National Forest, which is south of Cooke City. And then this is just in that same area up in the north Absaroka Wilderness. We operate 2 backcountry huts, the Mount Zimmer Yurt up in the corner and the Woody Creek Cabin. The Mount Zimmer Yurt is located 8.5 miles north of Cooke City, and we use snowmobiles to access that. It sits right on the edge of the wilderness boundary, and then we can walk from the hut to go skiing, or use snowmobiles to go a little farther to the north and get into really neat places like Goose Lake area. And the Woody Creek Cabin down here on the bottom is 2.5 miles south of Cooke City in a non-motorized area, so you have to hike from town to get there, and that provides access to a couple really nice valleys to go backcountry skiing. The Woody Creek Cabin was built by my business partner Ben Zavora in 2011, and he built that in one summer with just a little bit of help from a few buddies, and everything up there was hauled in by foot. So the metal roofing, the windows, and all the logs were taken on site. The wood stove, so we call it Cooke City CrossFit to get anything serious done up there. There's a lot of hard work involved in getting these huts ready and keeping them operating. So it's always pretty exciting opportunities you have to challenge yourself. So the Woody Creek Cabin sleeps 10 people, and the yurt sleeps 6. And so those are open for just individual reservations. We do guided skiing out of them, and then we do avalanche education out of them, which is really neat because it's a very immersive experience to do your avalanche education out of one of these huts. So I want to play this video for you of where our yurt is at. So our yurt operates in a very similar fashion as like a hunting camp does. So we have to take it down every spring and put it back up every fall. So it's quite a project. And we were up there 2 weeks ago setting up the yurt. And my friend brought his drone and got some neat footage. So it sits up on top of this little knoll right above Companion Lake, which is quite close to Round Lake. I don't know if anyone's been up to Round Lake. And it borders the Absaroka Beartooth Wilderness. It's a really neat spot. And so we were up there setting this yurt up a couple weeks ago, and my wife and her friend Ryan walked down to our truck. We can take an off-road truck up into this little valley on the left with some supplies that kind of help us get some gear in there to set it up. And they walked down to the truck to grab some water and another tool. And right here, they were here, right there, they noticed a bear. And the bear's about 400 yards, they said they saw it, and the bear started charging. Yeah. So the bear charged him all the way, like, they took a deep breath, my buddy started running, my wife told him to chill out, and they just started backing off, and the bear followed them for about 200 yards along the shore of the trail, and they eventually started heading back up to the yurt and started hustling it a little more. We were up there working away at the yurt, and they were yelling, "Get the bear spray, get the bear spray." And the bear luckily decided not to leave the shore of the lake, but gave him a pretty good scare. It chased him for like 600-700 yards. So those are some of that kind of fits into the Cooke City CrossFit realm, if you will, of like just interesting things that happen on a daily basis that really get your heart pumping up there.
Say, Reed, you got a question here about what you were just talking about. Can I go ahead and give it to you? Okay, so backcountry skiing in Greater Yellowstone includes an interesting objective hazard, grizzly bears. What is your personal and organizational approach to mitigating bear risks in grizzly country? And does that change from early season through midwinter through the spring ski mountaineering season?
Yes, it does change. So my personal, I always carry bear spray from about the 1st of April, maybe mid-March, depending on what the weather's doing, through December, so until December 1. So we carry bear spray. If I have, so if we're out there guiding with 2 guides in April, each guide would have bear spray. Clients don't necessarily have to carry bear spray. And then we, at the yurt in particular, we have a very comprehensive food storage program where we store all of our food and cleaning products in a bear-proof garbage can. So very similar to like just like standard bear protocol in the summer in the greater Yellowstone ecosystem. Now I will admit, I am always just a bear spray guy, but I had to go back to the yurt a couple days after the incident alone. So I carried a 10 millimeter and bear spray. So I wanted a little bit of extra security. I brought a gun. I don't usually carry a gun in bear country, but I was worried that he or she, I don't know what type of bear it was on a kill, and since I had to go back, I was a little more cautious. And I didn't run into her or him. I think it was actually a sow, but I'm not sure. But the bear came up to the yurt and was biting on the doorknob and left me a little surprised. And luckily the bear didn't do anything else. I mean, it could easily get through the yurt, no problem if it wanted to. So we're really heads up about bears from, basically mid-March through December.
Thank you.
And they do hibernate right in a lot of the areas we ski. One of my ski guides, Nina, and her boyfriend Alex Marienthal, who's a forecaster for the Yellowstone National Forest Avalanche Center, they had a bear encounter in May on one of our favorite ski runs. They were literally halfway down the run and they saw a sow pop up with her cubs coming out of her den.
Wow.
And she was just naturally coming out of her den for the season and noticed them and acted quite frantic. And then luckily they were on skis, so they just traversed into another area to leave her alone. But I've seen quite a few bears in like the fall and the early winter, and they're a little spooky because they do seem to be a little frantic and a little hungry before they bed down for the year. So long story short is we're pretty heads up about bears.
Great.
We also carry search and rescue radios, so we have communication all the time if there's to be an incident. But luckily there hasn't been any major incidents over the years, just a lot of sightings. Any other questions? So one of our main things we offer is guided skiing, and we're really just out there trying to get the best ski conditions for our clients. And it's a really, obviously, fun part of the job. Sometimes it can be stressful because you really put a lot of weight onto finding the high quality skiing, and that's getting harder and harder these days as the weather changes a little bit and also the popularity of backcountry skiing grows. So on the left there, that's just some typical what we call low angle powder skiing, which when the avalanche danger is higher, we ski on lower angle slopes to mitigate the avalanche risk. And then when the weather's a little better, we can get up into this area, which is called Goose Lake. That's Sawtooth Mountain in the background. And we can go do some really fun powder skiing here too when the weather's clear. And if the snow stability is good, we can get up and ski in some of these bigger lines too. It's really fun. Sawtooth Mountain is pretty much the reason I moved to Cooke City. I just became obsessed with that mountain. It's just so beautiful, and there's so much to do on it. It's very special. We also operate Beartooth Powder University, which is our education program. And so we offer a level 1 avalanche course, a level 2 avalanche course, a ski mountaineering course, and women's specific courses. And so we operate these out of the Mount Zimmer Yurt and the Woody Creek Cabin. And they're really special spots to teach because they're very immersive. A lot of avalanche courses, you may spend a lot of the weekend driving around to get to the ski resort or the trailhead. And when you're taking a course in a hut, you're just really getting to know your peers and your instructors and also the snowpack, which is really important for skiing in a place like Cooke City because the avalanche danger is pretty extreme there sometimes. We also offer the ski mountaineering courses that focus on getting into these higher alpine terrain and managing the risks of these steeper lines. And we work on rope skills, anchor building, and careful ski descents. These two on the left is in Yellowstone National Park. Unfortunately, we can't guide high angle terrain in the park anymore. So that's all personal skiing at this point. But this is out towards Sawtooth Mountain here on the right, what I showed you earlier. So we still have a lot of great high alpine terrain that we can access during our ski mountaineering courses.
Why did that change, the guiding aspect on steeper?
You know, I think it was the social media era, and there was a couple media related pieces that came out about ski mountaineering in the park. They weren't guide specific, but I think that it was a knee-jerk reaction from the Park Service. So we can't guide over 35 degrees in the park, which is a real bummer, but there's still a lot of great terrain out there.
So how did the park come about that decision?
I just think that as social media became more prevalent and more media came out and popularity of ski mountaineering in the park grew, they just didn't want the liability of guide services utilizing that terrain in that way. Which is kind of, like I said, it was a knee-jerk reaction, I feel, because, you know, ski mountaineering can be quite dangerous, but there's a lot of approaches you can take to it that would make it quite safe. You know, and the other thing, and I'm going to talk about avalanches a little bit, but avalanches are most dangerous from 30-degree slopes to 45-degree slopes, and a lot of the ski mountaineering stuff is over 45 degrees. So in reality, our avalanche danger is not the primary problem in a lot of these. It's more of an overhead exposure. But there is some avalanche danger, of course, especially in the approaches to these areas.
Thanks.
I hope that we can get that back someday. That would be really great because the park offers some very unique and special ski mountaineering opportunities. And like I said earlier, we also offer women's specific courses, and those just provide like a really cool learning environment for women that want to take these courses with other women. And we're really lucky to have very talented female guides on staff that work these courses with us, and we just get great feedback on them. They have a really high demand. We can't offer enough of them, quite honestly. So they're very fun. And so we offer the level 1 women's avalanche, level 2 women's avalanche, and a ski mountain. And the last thing we offer is specialty courses. So this is a course called Keeley's Camp for Girls, and they run backcountry education courses through Beartooth Powder Guides, and our guide pictured in front, Nina Hance, is an AMGA certified mountain guide, very talented local guide, and she runs this camp out of Woody Creek Cabin. It's a very cool program for these young girls. These girls are all like, I think between about 11 and 15 years old. And so by the time these girls graduate high school, they're very, very far along in their backcountry skiing careers. It's a quite a talented group of girls, and some of them end up returning, and it's a really neat program. So we offer courses like that, and we've offered some veterans courses in the past too. And so we're open to all kinds of opportunities to offer unique courses in these cool cabin settings. And like Karen mentioned, I'm also a member of Park County Search and Rescue, and so are a number of our guides on staff and my business partner, Ben Zavora. And I think there's some very talented members of Search and Rescue in Cooke City, but most of them are motorized users. So Beartooth Powder Guides offers a unique ability to get out into zones where there's no motorized access. So for example, this photo is on an accident called the Fin on Mount Republic in Cooke City, and there's no way to get a snowmobile into there And the day that this accident occurred, we had 2 guides in the area that were able to respond. And it just makes a world of difference to have crew members on search and rescue that can respond by foot. So we're really kind of proud to offer that service to folks, and it's very much needed. This is a really interesting avalanche. It's one of the larger avalanches that we've had in the last few years. Luckily, there's no fatalities in this, and so I'd like to share with you the accident report that came from the Gallatin National Forest Avalanche Center. One thing that they do that's really incredible, aside from forecasting, is these very comprehensive avalanche incident reports. So would you mind clicking on that link?
Is Mount Republic the same as Republic Peak?
No.
No.
Republic, so, no, there's a Mount Republic in the back of Republic Drainage, and a Republic Peak in the back and Mount Republic Peak. They're close, but Mount Republic's the one you can see in town.
Right.
I did not do the right thing.
I'll go back one. I think I can do it if you want a hand. But I checked the link.
Oh, yeah, you just gotta go over to it.
I'm here at the crown of an avalanche on the fin.
Well, it's going to stay small.
And on Republic Mountain, which is south of Cooke City. And yesterday, a group of 6 skiers triggered this. 3 were caught and 2 were injured. This is a large avalanche, and it went through some really bad terrain. When we came over, we were skinning in this morning. We got a great view of the whole basin, and it just made my stomach sink seeing this huge avalanche going through some really bad, complicated terrain. Thank God no one died. When the skiers were skinning up, they were on the shoulder, and once they broke out of the trees, they stopped and they dug a snow pit. Their snow pit was 6 feet deep. They did some stability tests, got no results, kept skinning up, and the snowpack went from 6 feet deep to 3 feet deep in a really short distance, and probably less than 100 feet. And as the snowpack got thinner, it changed. And it went from something that was solid to something that was weaker. And we have a lot of weaker snow in this thin snowpack. The avalanche that they triggered, they got a whoomp, a crack shot up the hill, 250 feet. Avalanche came down, caught 3 of them, and it was about 1.5 to 2 feet deep, 200 feet wide, and it went 700 feet vertical. 2 of the skiers ended up taking the full ride. They went all the way down towards the toe of the debris. 1 was injured, but able to ski out. The second one was okay, pulled his airbag, miraculously okay. And I say miraculously because not only is there a cliff band there, but there's also trees that they thankfully missed. The third skier got injured on the way down and got hung up on the cliffs. He was seriously injured, and Teton County Search and Rescue out of Jackson, Wyoming came and short-hauled him out of here and got him to the hospital. Park County Search and Rescue sent in a rescue team to assist everyone else getting out. Again, I'm just amazed that no one died. I'm so thankful. But we have here, with this thin snowpack, is a lot of newer snow in the last few weeks, sitting on some weaker facets. We're not, in most snow pits in Cooke City, we're seeing 6 feet of snow easy when we're out digging. This is probably the thinnest snow pit I've dug this year around here. And we're just seeing this in some of these upper elevation, some of these rocky areas, and this type of terrain is what we want to avoid, especially we're above tree line, we're high. If anything goes wrong, anything at all, the smallest slide is going to be dangerous, much less something big like this. So want to be heads up, dig, and be really careful in paying attention to if the snowpack is changing as you're skimming along.
Cool. I guess you don't need to pause it. I'll just leave it there for a moment, and then I'll go back to the slides. So the Gallatin National Forest Avalanche Center is such a great local resource. They cover just a tremendously large area of Cooke City, and also Big Sky, the Bridgers, down in the Centennials, and now even farther south toward on the park. So it's a very large area with a lot of different snow conditions that they're monitoring. So we're really grateful to have them as a resource. And when there are accidents, they do these very comprehensive analyses of them, which are really helpful learning tools. You know, and it's interesting, like this particular avalanche, I don't remember the danger that day was either low or moderate, not very severe. We were busy working, we were teaching an avalanche class when this happened, but snow stability wise, we were all kind of thinking, wow, this is called the fin. We were thinking, oh, this is maybe fin weather, like it hasn't snowed for a while, it's pretty stable. So the skiers were not totally out of their minds trying to go to ski this by any means, and they did their homework, they dug their pits, you know, they were testing the slope, but they still had an accident. Right? And I think the only other thing that they might have done to reduce their exposure is when we ski the fin, we typically go up a drainage and climb a ridge and then walk the top of the ridge around. And what that's doing is not exposing us to that terrain. So they were probably hiking up that slope for 2 hours or plus. And so they were just in that terrain for a long time. Whereas if you come from above, you can still test the slope a little bit, check stability, but they still could have gotten an avalanche if they would have came from the top. It's not saying that wouldn't happen. So can you get back to the slide? It's the next tab over, the guided experience. Yep. If you just go to present, it should work. Where is it? Huh. Double click or? Okay, here we go. Cool.
So what were they planning on skiing, or from what?
They were going to they would go to that summit and ski just that face. Yeah. Anywhere on that face. Most likely.
You were saying that you approach it from where?
We would walk that ridge that disappears in the left. You can walk up a low angle forest to get to that ridge, and then you can walk up the ridge and have zero avalanche exposure the whole time. But like I said, they did their homework, they did their tests, they were all very competent rescuers, most of them some ski patrollers, and very high level backcountry users.
And that's their switchback?
Yeah, that's it. The switchback is what we call a skin track.
That was their skin track.
This is where they dug up one pit, and they dug more than one, but they dug one. And the weird thing that had happened here during this event is the winds had been very strong that year, and it had ripped a lot of snow off that face. And the winds were also strong out of the northeast, which is kind of a rare wind for Cooke City. Typically the wind would be coming from the west and loading up that east face.
Sure.
And so that was an anomaly that year, and they hit a thin snowpack, and it was much thinner than it was over here where they were digging, and they triggered that persistent weak layer.
That, to me, that far point of their skin track where they propagated from, that, to me, that looks like a pretty exposed spot out in the middle.
Yeah, it's exposed, and that's why, like, I think the only bad call they made that day was skinning up there on that direction versus coming around, and it was just a choice they made, and that they knew about the other route, and they decided, well, let's go this way. And like I said, they were very skilled, so you know, anyone can make a poor choice in the backcountry. None of us are immune to that, and there's just some inherent risk involved in doing this, and you better hope that your friends are good at avalanche rescue, because that's what made the difference here. And they're all fine. But even this event, you know, like, we didn't get the guys, the remainder, you know, they long hauled one guy out, and I think this happened about noon, and I went up with the snowmobile to meet the rest of the capable skiers. They came out of the woods around 9:30 p.m. And then they're in a debrief, and then they're talking to families. It makes for a very challenging and difficult day. And we were lucky we even got them out because we were almost ready to keep them there overnight. But as search and rescue members, that's something we're ready to respond and make sure people can stay warm overnight, bring food and water. So, any other questions about incident response? So we love to promote the Gallatin National Forest Avalanche Center, and they've done a really good job of making sure the forecast is easy to get. If anybody wants to pull their phone up, that QR code will get you straight to the avalanche forecast. And then this presentation will be available online also. So this QR code, you can even get it through your laptop screen. It works pretty well. And these are some little posters, boards we made for the Miners Saloon up in Cooke City, trying to get the message out more to the motorized community. Because I'm going to show you in a few minutes some of our avalanche statistics, and in Cooke City in particular, they've really affected the motorized community more than the backcountry skiing community. But the idea behind avalanche safety is basically you want to get the gear, the beacon, the shovel, and the probe. You want to get some training, whether it's a level 1 avalanche certification, or just they have like little simple talks at Cooke City. They do them at Round Lake Cabin for snowmobilers, just like a 2-hour thing. Help people make decisions, learn how to make better decisions, show people how to get the forecast, get the bigger picture, and then how to get out of harm's way. And the best way to do that is if you're going to be in avalanche terrain, you have one person in it at a time. And so, for example, this is avalanche terrain, and they had 6 people in it at one time, right? And if you were going to put one person in harm's way at a time, it would take you 6 or 7 hours to get up the slope. So again, another great reason to do whatever you can to minimize the amount of time you're going to spend in avalanche. And then if they were going to ski it, then it would be one person skis to safety, radios up, or hand signal, then another, then another, then another. Then you have all the more people that are available for emergency response. Karen, what time do you want me to wrap up?
It's 7:40 right now.
Probably another 10,
Okay, cool.
10 minutes or so.
Cool. So this is what the front page of the avalanche forecast looks like. And as you see, the little dot on the right map, I know it's small, excuse me, that's Cooke City. And so there's, as you can see, 7 regions there, and each of those you could click on to get the specific forecast, because it'll change for different regions. Cooke City may have a different problem than Big Sky. And so when the forecast is live, it's not live yet, another week or so before we go there, those little gray dots would have a color associated with them for the danger rating. And so this is the danger rating. We call it the North American Public Avalanche Danger Scale. And it goes from low to extreme. And the really cool thing about this is it's used throughout the country and also Canada to give travel advice and some idea of what the size and distribution of an avalanche may be. So for example, on a low danger day, you have generally safe avalanche conditions. You want to watch out for unstable snow on isolated terrain features. And so that's what happened at the Finn. There was an isolated feature there that they weren't able to pick up on. So there still was an avalanche risk that day. And then the likelihood of being natural and human-triggered avalanches are quite unlikely, or small avalanches in isolated areas or extreme terrain. So that's how the ratings work, and they're really quite user-friendly because they give you that travel advice. Not to get too dark, but I think it's important to understand that the inherent risk in being in avalanche terrain. So these are the U.S. avalanche fatalities by year since 1951 to 2021. And I think the thing to note is around 1983, you have a pretty big jump, right? And a couple things happen there. Backcountry skiing starts to get a lot more popular and a lot more users. Any other thoughts to what that jump might be? Any old-time sledders in here?
More powerful snowmobile.
Yeah, the mountain sleds really came onto the scene in the late 90s. And that changed where snowmobilers, the type of terrain they could access. So we saw a huge jump in snowmobiler fatalities from there on. It's starting to level off as you can, so the death rate is still slightly high at 37, but if you look at the red 5-year average, it's starting to level off, which is showing avalanche centers and forecasters that their message is getting out there, and the motorized community is taking this a lot more seriously. So Cooke City's had 22 avalanche fatalities since 1998, and 21 were snowmobile related. And so there, again, it's the snowmobilers are accessing avalanche terrain at a pretty high rate up there. They have a bit of a different approach to it. That'd be a whole nother topic. But also, if you think about it, if you're hiking versus snowmobiling, you may only be able to get into avalanche terrain so much on foot, but if you're on a snowmobile, you have 10 times the opportunities to get there, right? So they're out there playing around, hitting a lot of different slopes. Last year, 3 of the 4 fatalities in Montana occurred in Cooke City, which is really sad and unfortunate. We responded to both of them via search and rescue. We had gone 4 years without a fatality, and so it was kind of a shock last year, and they happened pretty close together. And I think that the takeaway last year from that was they really disrupt the community too. It's a very heavy thing to have these incidents happening while you're just trying to live your daily life in Cooke City. And not to mention some of the first responders involved. It's a very intense experience for them too. So it's just important for us to get the message out of how to manage avalanche terrain and try to keep people as safe as possible. Questions on avalanche fatality stuff?
Excuse me.
Yeah.
I'm curious, so, obviously the usage has gone up.
Yep.
But are years rated like on whether or not they're on average lower susceptibility of avalanche versus higher?
I don't know if they're necessarily rated, but there is some thought process that goes into that. Like last year was actually a kind of a low year for avalanche fatalities. So last year total, right here, this box was 17. Any thoughts on why that might be the case? Yeah, we had no snow. So a low snow year can be extremely dangerous because of the snowpack going to rot, this faceting process that I don't think I'm going to have time to get into. But low snow years can have a weak snowpack, but also last year just wasn't a lot of snow. And then conversely though, like on a low snow year, it can be quite dangerous because people may push the boundaries a little bit because they're anxious to get after it.
What effect do you think guidebooks have at increasing risk for fatalities or avalanches with just getting people into avalanche terrain easier?
Yeah, you probably couldn't quantify it, but I wouldn't want to be a guidebook writer for avalanche terrain. I'll tell you that much. And there's a guidebook that exists that tells you to go up the fin in the route that I recommended not going. And the first thing we asked the crew when we were debriefing the rescue was if they used the guidebook as reference, and they said no. So that was just a question we kind of had in our minds. So yeah, and that particular guidebook writer has taken some heat for that, so I personally wouldn't want that pressure. I don't think it's quantifiable, but I know it's something, a guidebook is always going to try to reference you up in the safest fashion. But it's, and a lot of that's transitioning onto apps now. And the apps are doing a better job of helping you understand whether or not you're in avalanche terrain. So I think ultimately it could be a good thing to combine that data. So there's certain layers that give you like a hazard exposure rating now that they're working on, and so that can help with your decision-making factor. If you feel like not being exposed at all, maybe you'll choose a different route. Oh shit, I'm going the wrong way. So lastly on fatalities, is Montana ranks about second in fatalities to Colorado. And Colorado does have a probably much higher user numbers, but they also tend to have a much more dangerous snowpack. Because they exist in this continental snowpack as much as Montana does, which is very dry and shallow, which makes for lots of weak layers through this process called faceting. And that's a big contributor to these higher fatalities in Colorado. And then just by activity, you have backcountry tours being the highest, and then snowmobilers second. And this is the first year that that's flipped. Snowmobilers have ranked number 1 on that, and it goes down the list to climbers, side country, hiker. And then something that I've been thinking about lately is you have even hunters on there. So like last week's early season storm posed an avalanche risk hazard to a lot of people that were out hunting. So that's something to think about. And you know, the Avalanche Center always points out early in the year if there's enough snow to ski, there's enough snow for an avalanche. So if you want to get more involved in learning about avalanches and mitigating avalanche risk, you want to take a course, and those courses are going to teach you how to observe avalanche conditions, select terrain appropriately, learn safe travel methods, and then we practice our rescue skills, which is with our shovel, beacon, and probe. And those are really important to practice. A lot of people just learn to use those initially and then don't put much time into it. But it's something that you want to practice with at least at the beginning of every season, if not multiple times throughout the season. I'm running out of time. I was going to get a little more in depth to avalanche characteristics and how they occur. Does anyone have any questions about avalanches, layers, snowpack, anything like that? I'm just going to scroll through real fast and get to my last talking points.
Reed, take your time.
Okay.
You know, yeah.
Well, so one of the things that I'll just reboot right here then, because basically snow comes down as like a particle, and then as it hits the ground, it begins to decompose, and it basically goes one of two ways. It turns into something we call rounds or facets. And rounds are associated with warmer temperatures, and facets associated with colder temperatures. So think when I was talking about Colorado being more dangerous, they're dealing with colder temperatures and more prolonged periods of drought, which really exacerbates this creation of facets. So basically, as soon as snow falls out of the sky and touches the surface, it metamorphosizes throughout the whole season. And from a stability or a safety standpoint, we're looking for rounds. And it's just really cool. There's thousands of different snow forms, and these crystals come from the sky. They transform into grains, and it's just really neat to think about all the different types. And so all these different types of crystals, they all metamorph into different features, which is what we end up looking at in our snow pits to decide how stable the snowpack is. And so rounding, I was talking about, that was associated with warmer temps, deeper snowpack, and consistent snow. So when we're looking for rounded snow, that's an indicator that the snowpack is healing and is also a safer snowpack to play in. But you could have a nice rounded snowpack sitting on the top of a facet layer that's extremely dangerous. So faceting, that's common with these shallow snowpacks, Colorado, a lot of Montana. Luckily, Cooke City has a much deeper snowpack than anywhere in Montana, and so, but we have to skirt that line because it's not always that case. Whereas I grew up in Oregon, we have very deep snowpacks and hence very stable snowpacks. And these cold temps with gaps between storms is how we create these facets. And the classic setup for Montana is these very awesome October storms. Get a bunch of good powder, and then it dries up for 6 weeks, and it starts getting cold, and that's when that snowpack starts faceting or begins to rot. And then when we get our major storms, that's what that falls on, is this really weak layer that we call persistent weak layers, which are like the bane of our existence until like March sometimes. So persistent weak layers, they form in 3 ways: facets, surface hoar, and depth hoar. And those are kind of technical, like avalanche terms, but facets are formed with that temperature gradient I was talking about, these kind of cold, prolonged drought periods. Surface hoar, which is this right here on the right, is like a feathery looking snow form that forms on cold, clear nights. And it's like, someone explained this to me, and I think the best way to think about it, it's like sticking a piece of plywood on top of a bunch of champagne glasses, and you could stand on that, but if you shake it, it's going to fall right over, right? Or it's like a house of cards kind of. And so then you get these subsequent storms that layer on top of that, and they're these what we call persistent weak layers, and they will persist in the snowpack for months and months, and until there's either enough load on them to collapse them, or the snowpack goes what we call isothermal in the spring, where the temperature kind of goes consistent from the base to the top. Question back there?
Is depth hoar just buried surface hoar?
No, depth hoar is created during those drought periods. So it would be like that first storm of the season sitting down there, and then you get a couple more layers on top of that, and then it gets really cold, and it's going to wick all the moisture out of the snowpack, and that's how depth hoar is created. It's basically water molecules stacked on top of water molecules. You see how it's a pyramid?
How's that different than facets?
Facets can be formed anywhere in the snowpack. So it's very similar. They're undergoing a very similar metamorphic process. But that depth hoar is just at the ground. And it's from this temperature gradient of it being cold on top, warm, because the ground is always around 32 degrees. And so it's pulling the moisture up, and that's how you get those big conical features. And those depth hoar particles will be quite large. And facets can be a lot of range of sizes depending on the atmospheric conditions. So these persistent weak layers, they persist in the snowpack. They're hard to judge. They're hard to forecast. They produce very large avalanches, like that one I showed you on the fin. And so when we have a persistent weak layer problem in Cooke City, we don't guide in terrain over 30 degrees. We just don't. It's great because it's a very easy decision to make. Until we all decide that persistent weak layer is no longer a problem, we have a simple decision to make. We're just going to stay out of avalanche terrain. Let's skip through that. So there's 2 avalanche types. We have loose snow avalanches, which is that top fresh layer of powder snow. Then they usually run off in these fan shapes. They're usually pretty manageable. And they're not typically enough to bury you. And then our kind of scary avalanche types are these slab avalanches, these bigger avalanches that are formed either through wind or these persistent slabs like I was talking about, or a wet slab, which would be when the temperatures rise above freezing. And that becomes a real problem once temperatures raise above 32 degrees for more than 2-3 nights in the mountains. That's when we start having these wet slab problems. Or you get a deep slab, which is the scariest, which is where you have that persistent weak layer buried more than 3 feet down. And so you have like a whole season's worth of snowpack on top of that, and then you're dealing with very large avalanches. And that's just the anatomy of an avalanche there. You have the crown is at the top, and the start zone, and a stalk wall is where it starts to break out, and it runs through the track into a deposition zone.
Oh, Bruce Tremper.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. He's still out there putting out good data too.
yeah.
That's a typical avalanche path. You have this large start zone, a long track, and then this deposition zone. So as you can see, you're looking at these mountains, you can see where tree line is, and then you see all this absence of trees below tree line. That's a really good indicator that it's an avalanche path. Because it's continually ripping away the trees. And then, real quick, we just rate avalanches by size and destructive scale, from D1 to D5. Montana, we only get about a D4 is our biggest avalanche, which is big enough to destroy a railway, car, a large truck, building, or a section of forest. Whereas like a D1 would be relatively harmless. You just see the event. Probably wouldn't hurt you unless it swept you over a cliff or into trees. And where like a D5 would gouge the landscape. But you need about over 4,000 vertical feet of avalanche path to create an avalanche of that size, and we just don't have that landscape in Montana except for up north in the park. There's a couple of slides paths that are that large. They're also rated at a relative scale, so you have an R1. This is the same mountain you're looking at. You have an R1, just being a very small section of that slide path, or all the way up to an R5, which would be the entire width. So these are just ways to help think through what the consequences and severity of the avalanche might be. So the overall idea of these slab avalanches is that you have a hard layer over a soft layer and then another hard layer. So and a lot of times you'll hear a forecaster say we have something over nothing, and they'll stick their hand into that wall and pull out some really weak sugary snow. So if you can just, and you wouldn't even have to be able to understand much about snow grain characteristics, but if you could feel some soft snow under some hard snow, that's a recipe for dangerous avalanche conditions. I'm going to skip weather. So terrain, what are we thinking about when we're talking about avalanches? Remember I said we have 30 to 45 degrees is where avalanches occur, and 38 degrees is kind of the sweet spot. We're also thinking about aspect, because wind might be loading up like an east side of a face or stripping the west side, or sun might be melting the south side, and the snow might be good on cold on the north face. So we're thinking about aspect, and we're also thinking about shape, convexities and concave features. And so convexities tend to be, where a steep slope will roll over, and that's the highest point of tension, and that's where avalanches tend to break. So those are things you want to be able to ID while you're moving through the field to look for potentially hazardous spots. And then lastly, we like to focus on terrain traps, because you may not be in an avalanche like prone slide spot, but you might be in a deposition zone. So could snow pile up where you are from above? Could it take you over a cliff? Could it take you through the trees? So that's what we're thinking about with terrain traps. So from the avalanche perspective, I'll leave you with the 5 red flags. When any of these things are happening, there should be cues to help us think about what our avalanche problems might be. So wind, where is it coming from? Where is it depositing snow? A rapid rise in temperature can change the avalanche conditions real quick. Significant snowfall, cracking or collapsing. So if you just see the cracking snow while you're skiing or ski touring, that's an indicator that avalanches will be possible to trigger. And then obviously recent avalanche activity. And the more of these that you have present, the higher the danger is, essentially. So we're always on the lookout for these, and it's, when you're ski touring in the mountains, you're moving quite slow, so these things are easy to sort of take in and digest. And that's all I have for avalanches. I'm going to skip the problems, and I'm going to hop on my soapbox real quick and switch subjects. Does anyone have a question about avalanches? Yeah.
Overall, do you expect global warming to increase or decrease avalanche concerns in our area of Montana?
Yeah, it's hard to say. expect the unexpected. I think we might start seeing more persistent slab problems from more unique weather anomalies. There's also some really cool research going on that wet slides in the spring might be getting larger and more dangerous, and they're doing some really cool dendrochronology research on that right now, so they're going up to these major slide paths, and they're making tree rings and analyzing that data to look at slide frequency, and that has a lot to do with climate change, and they're noticing that they're correlating that even on low snow years, they're having very large spring events, which is kind of goes against how we used to look at avalanche activity. So I think just being ready for the unexpected.
Thank you.
Yeah. So cool. That's my spiel on avalanches. I want to just touch real quick on living in Cooke City and how crazy it is. And you all that live here shouldn't be surprised by this at all, but we have a serious housing problem up there. And that's the main limiting factor to us growing our business, is we provide housing for a number of our guides. And if I could have more housing, I could hire more guides and book more trips. But we don't. And we're very limited geographically there by the park and the national forest. And so these are just headlines that I chose from articles I've been reading lately. It's something I kind of follow. But, you know, it's not unique to Cooke City. And anyone that lives in Livingston or Bozeman is very well aware of the rapid rise in cost of living here and just the availability of housing. So there's one house on the market in Cooke City right now. It's an unwinterized log cabin. It's $650,000. So I'm essentially priced out of the market forever. I did what this lady did. I bought myself a trailer that I live in, and I have a friend that's nice enough to let me park there in perpetuity, so I at least know that I have a secure place to park. But, you know, I encourage you as community members, as if you see ways to get involved in helping the housing problem in these communities, do, because it's a huge problem that I think we need to solve before we lose all these cool services that come out of these communities. You know, and that comes all the way down to the chef in the kitchen, to the ski guide at my company. It's affecting everybody that's sort of not already bought in. And it's something I'm really, really worried about. And, so I just wanted to hop on my soapbox. This is a really interesting article about a lady in Durango. She makes like 90 grand a year as a nurse and lives in a trailer. You know, it's just an interesting situation that we've got ourselves into, kind of loving these places to death, if you will. And lastly, I kind of got into, NOAA released a really cool synopsis on the floods in June. I just thought I'd chat about that real quickly. Because what was really interesting that happened in Cooke City, I know it's quite small, but this is our snowtail in Cooke City, Fisher Creek, 9,100 feet. On 610, we had 32 inches of SWE. SWE is a density measurement of snow, so it's a little bit easier to understand like how much water is in that snow rather than just it being the actual inches of snow depth. So we had 610, we had 32 inches of SWE. 613, the storm's starting, 29.2 inches of SWE. And we got 3.6 inches of SWE melt. And then we got 5 inches of rain, 610 to 613. So basically you see that red line on the graph was the SWE over the year, and it really bumped up before the floods. And then this blue graph is the snow melt. So we got a lot of our snowpack in May and June, because we were pretty much in a drought season prior to that. And then, so we bumped up our snowpack, and then it started raining and got warm, and we lost our snowpack really rapidly. And so it was kind of a perfect storm, if you will. And that's how we ended up getting in that big mess that we got into. I thought that'd be fun to share. And I think that's all I got for you. Questions? This is a photo from, just real quick, this is a photo of me. I flushed a grouse when I was hiking, and I almost had a heart attack because I didn't see it until it was like second wing tap out. But this is it going in for the evening, and this is where I scared it and where it came out. So just another really cool kind of thing that happens when you're out there putzing around the mountains all the time.
Just a logistics question, when you have to take down your yurt every year, can you leave it there?
Yes.
In,
Yeah, parts of it.
Okay.
So I can leave the frame and the cover.
you
And
pack
then
it
all
up
the
in a net box?
furnishings we take, so we have bunk beds
Uh-huh.
and like a full kitchen cabinet, and we load it up on a snowmobile trailer and haul it back to town. It takes about 10, 12 trips. It's a pretty labor-intensive operation. Yeah. But like I said, it's good training. Cooke City CrossFit.
What's your ideal, client to guide, and then what's your nightmare client?
Client to guide ratio, is that what you're asking?
No, like personality wise.
Oh,
Or skill
so
wise.
yeah, anyone that's willing to try is a great fit. So you just got to be open, because we're happy to help people learn their gear, no matter what the skill level. We get a lot of beginners that are very self-conscious, and we try to just squash that right at the beginning. We are very hands-on, want to help, and if you're willing to try, we can pretty much keep you out there almost all day. Because we really, a good guide is going to set a pace that their client can maintain throughout the day. Because we're trying to keep you out there to get you that experience. So you just got to be willing. The nightmare client is typically like a person that's done a lot of heli skiing. Because they can't get enough runs in, but they're not fit enough to either, so it's not really my problem. So that's an interesting one, when the client is frustrated that they're not skiing more, but they're not skiing more because their physical ability is limiting that. That's tricky. But it's very rare. We have such a great experience with all of our clients.
Where's your client base coming from? Like the majority, the Rocky Mountain region, or
Yeah.
maybe Europe, European?
A little bit of Europe. We're starting to see a more international client base. Probably mostly Bozeman is the bulk of our clients. We're getting a lot of the newcomers that are moving to Bozeman and learning. Well, you come to Cooke City and it's quite complex terrain up there, so maybe they come out and oh, this place is scary, and then they back off, get a guide to get to know the area. But yeah, a lot of Rocky Mountain states, Utah, Colorado, Oregon, California too, and some European clients. That's a little more rare. Yeah, and we're starting to get a lot of clients that used to go to Europe. So Americans that typically went to Europe but now are staying closer to home. And it's funny. A lot of them will be like, "I've been going to Europe for 20 years." And I lived in Bozeman, I had no idea it was so good here. It's so much better than Europe. So it just depends. I mean, if you're coming to Cooke City though, and you're used to going to Europe, you're not going to get the same experience. There's a lot more cowboy out there, but the skiing's a lot better. We got wildlife. We got all that stuff. Is there a question back there?
Yeah, I was just curious about any stories or information about how you keep people fed. And that
Yeah.
whole aspect of your guiding.
Before we go skiing for the day, we have a meeting with clients and we make sure they have enough food and water. So they carry their own food and water. Guides also, we all carry a lot of extra food. Just, if someone's getting tired or cranky, feed them some food. But yeah, it's pretty much self-sufficient. The huts, we have groups that will, we don't offer food at the huts anymore. That was something we had to abandon with COVID, and it's something that we're looking to get back into. But we'll haul food into the huts and help them with a meal plan if they need. And, yeah.
Thanks.
Questions? Well, thanks for your time.
Thank you.